What comes to your mind when you hear the concepts of language and gender issues together? You may think that these two concepts are not correlated, but they actually are.
When we talk about language and gender, most of the people tend to think into the characteristic difference between men's and women's use of language. But since the half of the 90s, the concern of the linguistic researchers are focused on the diversity of gendered and sexual identities and practice. In the work of Deborah Cameron, Language, Gender and Sexuality, Current Issues and New Directions, she is centered in sociolinguistic research which investigate the linguistic construction of identities and social relations. For the linguists who early researched on language and gender in the 70s, by the way, most of them women's and feminists, the issue was to show how language using was implicated in the process of becoming a woman or a man, also called dominance approach to language and gender. Robin Lakoff in the 70s emphasized on the effect of gender inequality as a result of patriarchal socialization, what she called women's language. That means that male dominance and female subordination were considered to be reproduced as well as replicate in gender differentiated linguistic behavior. In more simple words, the effect of gender inequality indicates that women's language is a display of subordinated status to which women in patriarchal society were condemned. In opposition to this idea, Tania came in the 90s with the theory of cultural difference, stating that linguistic gender difference were not produced by the subordination of women as such, but by the social arrangement that separate the genders in the performative period of childhood and adolescence. This considered that boys and girls learn different ways of speaking according to the same sex per group they participate in. Although this theory offered constructing point of view, they both regarded linguistic difference as a matter of gender rather than sex, and both described them as a product of early socialization. Simone de Beauvoir asked in her book The Second Sex, "Are there women really?" referring to if the identification of being a woman has any biological grounding. And Judith Butler said, "No, there are no brute facts of biology. We know sex only through the ideological filter of discourses about gender, and one is not more natural than the other. Both are cultural constructs." According to Judith, gender is a phenomenon brought into being when it is performed. That is to say, it is an ongoing accomplishment produced by your repeated actions. The idea of gender as an accomplishment is also found in conversation analysis, where the construction of gender in and through talk has been analyzed. Harold Garfinkel exposed that social behavior is determined by global structures, and the organization of everyday life is produced by social actors supervising their activities locally. Maybe it could be a little hard to understand this concept, but if we take it to the discussion of gender, we can say that global constructs, such as gender or power, are though relevant only to the extent that participants in interactions made them relevant through their own words and actions. As you can see, in gender difference theory, the fundamental question is, how are women different from men? Which the diversity theory could answer with another question, which woman and which men do you mean? And the answer is, there is not such a thing as a generic man or woman. The growth of studying men and women in non-traditional occupations is due to the increasingly visible presence of transgender and transsexual people, and people whose gender identities are not determined by the sex of their body, has not only motivated the queer theory, a critical inquiry to the norm on which social arrangement should be based, and the idea of gender as a performative, but also has motivated the shift from the gender as binary to the diversity of genders.
Now, if we center in gender differences in classroom context and language learning, Jane Sunderland came to all minds with the issues of language and gender in second and foreign language education. Sunderland investigation is centered on gender differences that affect the achievement and subject choice in education. She expressed in her article the reasons that research have developed throughout the years, which had not completely explained why boys or girls at school tend to have negative or positive performance in subjects, but more specifically in second and foreign language learning. The reasons that Sunderland explained are how social environment affects subject choice, if there exists an innate or biological ability that creates differences between genders, motivation, learning styles and strategies, classroom interaction, and teaching material. If we analyze each point more deeply, we can start with how the social environment affects subject choice. A gender difference aspect at school and a currently issue is the fact that teachers may believe girls and boys tend to perform better in certain subjects, as for example, girls being better at second and foreign languages than boys. This leads that the subject choice is conditioned by cultural and social beliefs associated with how genders should act. But it is important to mention the difference between single-sex and mixed schools. In a boys' schools, the percentage of boys that choose the study of foreign language is bigger than in mixed schools. You can see the graphic. According to Sunderland, the question we should ask ourselves is if that preference is making girls do not think they are good enough in subjects as maths, science, or technology, taking them away from a different career path. Another point is that if there exists an innate or biological ability that creates gender differences. Linguists try to explain if gender difference in achievement in language learning has to do with an innate or biological ability. In one hand, according to Maccabee and Jakin, Hirst and Halpern, women has an innate or non-innate ability to verbal achievement or superiority to men. On the other hand, Clandelius, Ekstrand, Hyde and Lynn expressed that biological differences between men and women in terms of verbal ability are minimum or even zero. So, biological terms cannot explain why women seems to have a more developed verbal ability in languages, but it seems that social context could be the explanation of this construct gender difference. The example of mixed and single-sex schools prove it. The third point is motivation. Motivation was also a factor of studying the differences between genders. At schools, boys' perception of second and foreign languages was as a difficult subject that was matter of their female classmates who were actually motivated. To sum up, boys were not motivated with language due to foreign language subjects stereotyped as a career only for women, and gender itself, the need to perform masculinity avoiding the girls' stuff. Studies on teachers' perceptions of whether gender affects motivation in foreign language students show that teachers thought that gender was not an issue for their students. Moreover, other teachers expressed that boys' motivation was affected by social factors. They were accomplishment the norm. Also, that boys are not motivated because there are not sufficient male teachers and the work at school is seen as something for women in general. The fourth point is learning styles and strategies. Learning styles and strategies between genders are not that different. However, girls having a more elevated achievement in foreign and second language learning can be explained by the kind of learning style they have, a more global and reflective. Still, more proofs are needed to understand why girls still have better results, and the social context factor is not discarded. The fifth point is classroom interaction. If we center in teacher talk from non-language classrooms, Researchers have noticed gender differences as teachers have more interaction with boys than girls in giving approval or disapproval, listening, and giving instructions. Teachers used to reprand girls when they were calling out, even if boys did the same. Teachers asked more focused questions about the subject to boys, and they asked open questions to girls. According to Gore and Romago, in math classes, teachers give more response time to boys, and they were constantly interrupting girls. From language classes, this was completely different. Teachers did not behave showing a real contrast between gender treatment, but some differences were. Teachers giving attention to boys in terms of non-academic questions, more disciplinary. Teachers asking more academic questions to girls than boys, due to the concentration girls reflect in language classes. If we refer to the difference between male and female teachers and their interaction with the students, boys had more tendency to express themselves to male teachers at school. Difference with university level is observed where male students interrupt more than females, and even more if it was a female teacher. The last point is teaching material. Teaching material always has been sexist. Now with the inclusive language, little changes have been made. Textbooks and material in general is focused on encouraging boys to study or choose certain subjects to perpetuate gender roles. Sunderland also refers to how English has become one of the languages that is less sexist than others. She expressed that linguistic items of sexist language as the generics he and man has discriminated, reduced, or excluded women from language, and that learners have to know the importance of using more global concepts as he or she, or the singular they, and s/he. According to Sunderland, material is available in dictionaries and many pedagogical grammars, due to a large number of institutions have been asking for the use of inclusive language. Moreover, Sunderland used part of her article to explain the role of teachers and how they are also under the gender roles. She expressed that language teachers around the world are more likely to be women. Studies have shown that due to the feminine nature of the profession, many men were not interested in studying a language teacher career. Oppositely, many applied linguists at university are men. Suggestions to remediate language teaching regarding non-sexist language, discussing stereotypical terms in textbooks, and reversing gender roles in terms of subordination have been set on table. Moreover, critical pedagogy represents another tool to eliminate inequalities that not only take place in a classroom but all over the world. Critical approaches to TESOL has introduced a large discussion in which critical pedagogy can act in terms of gender, race, sexual identities in English as a second language, immigrant people, and feminism in English as a second language. Bandrick suggests that many language teachers are not critical about what they are teaching, a complete contradiction, due to language teaching is too political, even radical. It is important that language teachers discuss the male dominance in classrooms, the gender imposed in many textbooks, and also their own relationship with students in general. If we ask ourselves, why still gender differences exist in educational context? Sunderland's explanation is that gender is normally oppositional, is seen as a binary opposition, which explains why if women tend to be better at languages, men should not. Furthermore, men must keep the concept of masculinity. So if they are seen doing something that is for girls, boys or men could lose their high social level. Now, With all this information in mind, it is clear that gender differences are linked with language and education. Cultural contexts have perpetuated the minimization of women throughout history, creating an uneven education for men and women in which language has played an implicit role. Since the second wave of feminism, investigations by women in general show how language and education helps to preserve inequality, sexism, and stereotypes between genders. Some examples are more than clear. Women fighting for the right of education, but still, education has preserved the stereotype role of women being the ones in charge of taking care of people. This is explicit in the careers that women were encouraged to study, according to society, as teachers or nurses. Men, on the other side, were still seen as the ones that should be in charge of important work positions, and being encouraged to study careers oriented to science, maths, and technology. Language and education also perpetuate stereotypes by the use of certain words as housewife, policeman, fireman, etc. Moreover, also the use of words or concepts that determined sexism, as bitch or slut to refer when a woman had more than one partner, and champion to indicate when a man had several sexual encounters. Also, words in Spanish are used, such like nana, niñera, médico, etc., and also expressions that keep alive stereotypes. In the case of both languages, is the expression don't be a pussy, or no seas niñita. Authoritative tone is likely to be men's tone. In fact, Margaret Thatcher, who in the 70s became Britain's first woman prime minister, took lessons to make her voice seem firmer and more powerful. Education accepting masculinity by A. Encouraging more boys than girls to express themselves in classrooms, and also forcing girls to do not call out when they were not asked to. B. Accepting that there exist subjects where boys had better results and girls had not, and vice versa. And C. Using teaching material where girls were disadvantaged by the superiority of boys in texts. Now that we already saw some examples on how education and language perpetuates gender differences, we are going to do an experiment that is going to be about how gender roles are in the mind of pedagogy students and teachers.
I think it is very tricky because I think it's a game of words, but I'm not sure. I cannot tell why the boy is the father at the same time.
I think maybe the son is already dead and his spirit is like watching the situation.
Like the guy is adopted.
Yeah. The text said that the dad died, so how can be the father operating him? Or probably he has two parents, two fathers, because they got married and adopted a child, probably, you know.
So wait a minute, they were both in the crash.
Yeah.
One of them is the surgeon, right? But then they both arrived together. He's adopted? And so the surgeon thinks that that's why he has a son, maybe?
No, I don't know. I don't know, but he travels in time. No, I don't know.
So pretty sure this is a homosexual relation. Because that's what we believe when we think of it in Spanish, because if we translate surgeon, we immediately think of a cirujano, and we believe it's a man. But it could be, it's very ambiguous, because it could be both, a woman or a man.
The answer is that the surgeon
That's true, of course. Oh, very ingenious, very ingenious. I thought of a different thing, but yes.
Qué tricky.
Qué tricky.
What a tricky.
Oh, of course, and we assume that it's...
Yeah.
You're right. Totally right. We always assume surgeons are males, and they can be female.
That's simple. Yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah.
Hi, Erin.
Hi.
Okay, so I'm gonna just give you some actions to do. Just do the first thing that comes to mind. Show me what it looks like to run like a girl.
My hair.
Show me what it looks like to fight like a girl. Now throw like a girl.
Aww. My name is Dakota, and I'm 10 years old.
Show me what it looks like to run like a girl. Throw like a girl. Fight like a girl. What does it mean to you when I say run like a girl?
It means run fast as you can.